Today I'm going to be talking to Ruby Taylor, and we're sitting in the woodland, but you can't see anything because this is only on audio.
It's very beautiful in a January kind of way.
Yes, by a lovely fire which you've made.
Just.
So welcome, Ruby.
Thank you, Vic. Lovely to be here.
Yeah, it's lovely to be here.
Nice to see you.
Nice watching you light that fire as well. I know it was challenging.
It was.
But it was
That's
good.
a damp January twig for you.
So I'm going to be sitting over here. Hopefully you won't have to move too much with the smoke. So my traditional first question is, what do you do?
Oh, well, my traditional answer is I'm a maker and an educator.
Oh.
I think it's fair to say.
Mm-hmm. So the next question is,
What's that?
what do you make?
Oh. I mean, I make vessels quite a lot, but I don't only make vessels. So by vessels I mean forms that hold space. So usually sort of smallish scale, so the kind of scale that you could hold in a couple of hands. But I sometimes work larger if the opportunity arises. But I also, I work with plant fibres and clay, basically, is the sort of bottom line. I've made larger structures that are not like vessels, which are more like installations in the natural world, big pieces. And I love to do that kind of work. But the sort of day-to-day making is smaller size.
That's a nice answer. Obviously I've seen some of your work, and we did that. Came on one of your wild pottery.
I was trying to remember which course you'd been on.
Yeah.
It was pottery.
Yeah, and it was wonderful.
Oh, it's such a good one, that one.
It was wonderful.
What did you like about it?
Well, for me, I think it was the fact that it was literally starting from the beginning of getting the clay out of the ground and going through the whole process, and then obviously firing it up, and that sort of, there was no certainty that something would work. I think that.
In my mind, I've certainly.
Yeah.
But
well, it's a bit like, well, I can, yeah.
But as much certain as one can ever be.
Yes.
You're getting a lot of smoke in your face.
Yeah, I am. Don't worry. I might have to move.
But yes, there's an element of risk always, actually, with that kind of firing.
Yeah, but that's like music.
So you put all the things in place, and you as far as you're aware, you've got the things you need. But there's always unknown variables, aren't there?
Yes.
And so when it finally comes to it, whether it's the pot firing, or whether it's the performance, you never quite know.
No. But also, I don't know whether this must be true to some point. When things don't quite work, sometimes something else happens.
Yeah. That's what I love about the process.
Yeah.
That's what I love about this type of work. Because, as you say, it allows for the unexpected. And that's so important in creative process, isn't it?
Yes, I think so, because that's one of the things we sort of try to take out of any process that we've done, that uncertainty. You know, we sort of try to do that with life generally, aren't we?
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, and these times are all about living in uncertainty, and that's deeply challenging as humans, to the human condition, the human experience rather.
Well, certainly a modern human experience.
Yes, I think we have this idea that we have dominion over things as humans, and the reality, of course, is that we don't. and how do we live with that? It's challenging. But to bring it back to the making, that's also why I forage all my materials, because I want to use materials that have their own unexpected, non-uniform characteristics.
Yeah.
For that reason too, so I have a sort of like a dialogue with the materials, and I follow what they're presenting in a way. So that's particularly true with when I'm making bark containers. I don't know if you've seen the bark containers that I've made, but there's with bark, more than any material I work with, it has this unpredictability. And what that means is that often about 30% of what I make doesn't work. But it gives amazing opportunities for beautiful things to evolve from the making, because it twists and moves as it dries and shrinks and things like that. And I could never have an idea of what I'm going to make and then make it. I always have to start with the material and see where the material leads me.
Oh, that's interesting. I'll come back to that, because there's a point that I think is interesting with writing music. So let's go back to the beginning then.
Okay.
When do you sort of get the idea that I won't say that you were artistic, that's a nonsense statement. What I mean is...
Well, it's not a nonsense statement,
No,
actually.
it is. I mean, children are artistic anyway, aren't they? But I mean, when do you...
Well, that's true, yeah.
When do you sort of, in your life, you start getting noticeably drawn to things that are...
Would you know, it's always been a part of my identity, I think, that I've had of myself. I think I got a lot of feedback in my life that I was creative and had artistic abilities. I think also, but I think preceding that was a connection to the natural world, which I think has been with me for as long as I can recall. I have so many early memories of being outside, and actually this fire is so smoky. Oh my god.
Yeah, it's a good job we haven't got the camera on.
Visuals, there'd be nothing to see it but plumes of smoke. Actually, you know, I think my mum did this thing with us when we were babies, which isn't, I don't know if people still do it. She used to put us in the prams, with the kind of prams where you could lay on your back, and put us in the garden. And I think that that thing of lying under the trees in the summer and hearing the sound so that's still the most soothing experience for me is to lay under trees and listen to the leaves in the breeze and see the light through the leaves. And I think it must stem from that time of being put outside, left outside for hours at a time. And we did have a safe garden, I should say. But so I think that, and I have many memories of being very small and investigating plants and creatures in the garden. I mean, that must have been, 4 or 5 years old, I imagine. I don't know. And both my parents are very hands-on, practical people, and so there was always a lot of making and doing happening in the family. So it was part of our family culture, I think, to be doing a lot of that. And I think school, my primary school was good. We had lots of creative things we did. We did clay work, we did lots of making, we did sewing, drawing, lots of stuff. And I think that was a very rich foundation for me, both those things, actually.
Oh, that's interesting, because it's funny when I talk to people, there's so many things that people say and I go like, oh, I did that. One of the things that I think that was something that people did, was they put their babies out in the prams outside.
Yeah.
The idea is for them to get some fresh air.
Yeah.
But I grew up in Cornwall and spent most of my time, picking up stones and turning over the paving slabs that my dad had put down in order to find out how many ants were under there and everything, and which was a nightmare because obviously nothing sat properly when I put the stones back.
Yeah, you disturbed it.
But it was literally like, there's a wasp's nest, you know, and I'd be like,
fascinating.
I was totally fascinated by insect life.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things that when you grow up in that environment, I don't know whether it's because it's in your nature to do that stuff, or it's the nature that makes you do that stuff, if that makes sense, you know.
I think it's our nature to do that stuff. Our nature as inquisitive creatures that we are.
I would say that.
To engage in that way, to investigate and be curious. I think that's a natural, beautiful thing. And if we're lucky, we have the opportunity to express that when we're growing up, and hopefully then that would stay with us.
Yeah, and I think that's, you know, with my sort of work with teaching, that's something that I think is disappearing.
Really? Do you see it disappearing?
Well, I do, because for a lot of kids, I'm just going to stand to one side.
You're getting kippered.
Well, I am, yeah. Anyway.
Sorry, it should get more flamey soon and then it won't be so
Yeah, it'll be fine in a minute. It's not that I'm not unfamiliar with smoke.
Yeah, quite. You know what you
Anyway,
mean?
so, as we were saying about, with teaching kids, there was this sort of thing where you realise that they're not getting as much contact with nature.
Yeah.
You know, and they're not allowed to roam.
No.
And I think that's the problem. It's almost like everything's micromanaged. There's no chance for them to explore on their own without being observed. And I think that's problematic.
It's very problematic, and you hear it a lot, don't you? People of our age talking about how we have memories of going out after breakfast, and the arrangement was that you came home in time for supper.
Yes.
And that was the norm when I was growing up in a rural part of the country.
Where were you?
South Oxfordshire, in the Thames Valley. And so, you know, I'd go out with my sister usually on our bikes, and we'd go and round the lanes, across the fields. We had a special stream that we went to and played with, dug caves in the banks of the stream and found sticklebacks and watercress and all those beautiful things, and, you know, probably got into a few scrapes, but that was the norm actually, and I think that's very rare for children today.
Well,
for lots of different reasons, and I think it's a tragedy. And I mean, the forest school movement is hopefully rebalancing some of that, but I don't know to what extent it's actually possible through that medium.
Well, even that, you know, that has its, I would say, its own problems. I mean, unfortunately, that's still within the concept of the structure of how we're living now, isn't it?
Yeah, yeah.
But so you were out there doing, you know, exploring and what have you, presumably just, as children do, just making things. Yeah, but there's a lot of making at home. A lot of craft work happened at home. My mum was really into working with textiles, well, all kinds of crafts actually. Yeah.
And so there were often craft projects happening that she would. I don't know whether my other siblings got involved or whether it was just me that she facilitated in that way, whether she saw a kindred spirit in me because she liked to do those things. But I remember at birthdays and Christmas always getting craft kits.
Yeah.
And so it was very sort of, very clear parameters in that sense. It wasn't like artistic exploration, it was learning skills and techniques. And my dad grew up on a farm, and so he had developed that amazing facility that farmers have of being able to make anything, fix anything, work with any materials. And so I think I have lots of memories of watching him do stuff and make things work and repair things. And I think that it was definitely informed me a lot in terms of resourcefulness and making things up, shall we say.
Yeah, that's an interesting thing.
Yeah.
There's a friend of mine who he's in the T8, but he's been in the territorials for years, and obviously did stints out in Afghanistan and goodness knows what else. And he tells an interesting story about the American Army and the British Army. If the Americans needed anything, they just sort of basically sent a memo and it turned up. You know what I'm going to say next?
No, I don't know what
well,
you're
the British Army, there was nothing. So, they didn't have the gear. They never had the gear. So it was all a bit like, well, okay, how can we make this happen with what resources we've got? So they'd be going off to the Afghan market to buy body armour that was, the Afghans were selling like Russian body armour and all the rest of it. But it was also a case of, this thing doesn't work. How can we cobble this together and it seemed to be what was going on with the British Army. Right? But of course you can sort of almost see that with what's going on with this COVID stuff at the moment. It's like, gear's not there.
Making it up as you go along.
Make it up as you go along. Sort of Heath Robinson type of thing. So there is something in that which is our natural way of resourcefulness, isn't
yes,
it?
I wonder if it's something to do with the experience of the world wars in the UK, actually.
Yes, could be.
Because I think for my dad's generation, the resources were scarce. There wasn't a lot of money around to get stuff. There wasn't a lot of stuff to even get. And the mentality of having to make do with hardly anything, I think, really embedded in the psyche. And I noticed my dad has been married now to an American woman who grew up in America, and I noticed she has much more the attitude you describe of she would just send a memo, if she was, she would just get what she needed to get. There was no sense of having to save stuff that might be useful later down the line.
That's right.
And make do with the bits and bobs that you've got.
Yeah. I'm just checking on stuff at the moment.
Yeah, technical moment.
I am. Says he.
Are we all right?
Well, we'll find out. Yes, it's still going. It's just I don't tend to use this bit of software.
Okay. You're going to edit that bit out or you keep it in?
I keep it in.
There's that apocryphal story. My dad always loves to tell this story. I don't know where it originates, but it's of I think I don't even know where it's based, the story. But anyway, somebody is clearing out their deceased father's shed, and there's boxes of screws and nails and rubber bands and washers, string, and then there's one box that's got a label on it that says string too short to be useful. And of course in that box are bits of string too short to be useful. And that was I think that was really the post-war mentality here.
I think so.
And there's definitely not around anymore.
No.
But I think there's an awareness of scarcity of resources, though, that's maybe rising up. It's always a bit.
Maybe it's because
dodgy.
we're an island nation. Do you think?
Yeah, I think so. And I think with concerns about natural resources on the planet and so on, I think that's I mean, certainly that drives what I do. I don't want to be making things where I mean, there's too many things in this world. There's too much stuff in this world that have been made by humans, and I don't want to add to that. But I also have to honour my need to express myself through making and my love of materials and working with my hands in that way. And so for me, working with natural materials which I harvest myself and then totally biodegradable, I'm okay with that.
Yeah.
You know, I'm okay with being a maker, making objects that go out into the world, knowing that they're of that type.
Yeah.
I can sleep at night, you know, and I think there's generally people building awareness of that as an issue. Certainly in the making community, I see that.
Yeah.
You know, see lots of potters talking about how to make their practice sustainable, ecologically speaking, and I think that's why people like to come on my courses too, because there's that same sense of having a small footprint but still being creative and creating an object.
I'm interested in the way that type of thinking, it's like the deep structure of thinking, right? Like you get with, well, in NLP there's this thing of deep structure of language. So you can say something, but what you say and how you say it tells, if you listen, tells you more about the person than the actual statement. So for instance, as an example, if somebody said, this morning I walked the dog, that tells you a lot about that person. The fact that obviously they've got a dog, but they live in a place that they can have a dog, which puts them in a particular place, if you like, economically, right? And they've got somewhere to walk the dog. So there's lots of things underneath that you don't, it's not a logical thing. It's like a resonance underneath that tells you something.
Yeah.
So going back to your thing about people coming on your course, about the small footprint and everything, that type of, there's a similar thing about, how can I put this, about what's going on in people's thinking. Although they may not be the type of person who's out there going, oh yeah, so everything's got to be sustainable, blah blah blah. But somewhere in their thinking is that type of thought. It might not resonate in their whole life, but it changes, you know, just coming on doing that course. When they go to buy something, they might just think, okay, I need to get blah, but this time I'm not going to get something that I can just chuck away. This is going to last me a lot longer, or it's something that I can repair. It's just a different undercurrent, and I think that's really important.
Yeah, and I think also the other thing about the way that I do my own work, and also when I run my courses, that I'm really keen for people to experience is the whole cycle of production, from the raw material in its naturally occurring environment, processing that, making a finished object, a product if you like. And firstly, in this country, most people are extremely separated from that cycle of production. We don't really have a manufacturing industry, we don't really process raw materials anymore. And most, you know, lots of people don't even know how where a carrot comes from. And sadly, it's true. And so I think, I feel it's something important to me to be able to share with people. And also the other thing that still, I think now I'm more used to it, but for many years it always kind of surprised me that the harvesting and processing the material takes at least as much time as the making itself, and quite often more time actually. And that's such an interesting process to go through, because it gives you a very different relationship to materials
Yeah.
and products. And, you know, I don't know when people come on my course how much that translates into other areas of their life, if they extrapolate. Obviously, I hope that they would. But anyway, I'm sowing seeds, and that's all I can do. Yeah.
Do you know, that is something really a really powerful thought, because I want to dwell on it a bit. This has not come up in any of the conversations I've had with people before. There's a little story about the guy who turns up to fix a boiler on a ship. You know, we don't know how true this is. But there's a problem with the boiler, and he comes in, you know, has a bit of a tinker around, listens to this thing, gets his hammer out and hits this pipe. And suddenly the whole thing kicks into gear and it's fine. So he sends the bill, and it's whatever it is, you know, 100 quid or something. And somebody, you know, the person turns around and says, "You're only here for 5 minutes. You know, that's a lot of money." So he says, "Well, I'll change the bill then." So the guy sends the bill in again. It still comes to £100, but the first bit is time taken to fix problem, £5. £99 for all the work and experience of over 30 years of assessing what that problem is.
Exactly.
And I think, you know, with music and any creative process, you know, the metaphor is that that's always the way. There's a lot of time before you get to the finished item, or even the beginning of finishing the item off, that somebody can go, "Oh my goodness," you know, it's whatever it is, the painting, the piece of music, you know, the pot, the basket,
The boiler that works.
the boiler that works. And again, that's something else that we've sort of lost, that, because this sort of immediacy thing, which comes back to, we can send a memo to get the the thing that we're missing type of attitude. And my belief is that we have to get back to a way of thinking like that, of something that you're going to do is a long process of either learning or, you know, the build up to that. Like, again, your journey to doing this stuff obviously started off when you were incredibly young, maybe to a point in time you can't remember, before you get to that bit where suddenly you go, right, people start to recognise that I'm creative, and they start saying to you, "You're very artistic, you're very this and that." But that process has been going on for years. And I'm just wondering how much. Sorry, I have to move again. The smoke lights me today. I'm just wondering how much we've lost that long gestation period that people need for the creative, or just anything actually. It doesn't even
It's
have
about
to be the
it. It's about it being recognised, I think, isn't it? And
Yeah.
I think our culture is a bit geared towards do a weekend course and then you're an expert.
Well, that's exactly where I was
but
going.
Let's not go too far down that rabbit hole. But there is an element of that, isn't there?
There is, and it does trouble me. And I'm not saying that's all.
Look, there's a heron.
Oh my God! Yeah, how lovely.
It's coming in to see the pond.
Well,
Ooh,
that's beautiful.
that's wow! Good navigating through the trees.
Oh, wow. That is lovely.
That's the first time I've ever seen a heron here. It's because the banks have been cleared, and so it's can see the water coming in to see what's happening. I don't know if there'll be any food in there for it though, because it's quite a stagnant pond.
It's taken off now.
Yeah.
That's a nice
That's a nice thing to see.
omen.
Yeah.
So yeah, to talk about the weekend courses, because obviously the problem is you're always. I feel like this. You know, I always feel as if I'm cutting cards with the devil at some point. You know, where you're doing things you think, well, you have to do that in order for your work to, you know, have some patronage.
Have to do what?
Well, you know, doing the sort of things where you're teaching people to do something very, you know, distilled. I obviously teach things like songwriting, like crash courses in songwriting. But of course, the idea is they need to take that away and carry on working with it.
Yes, and I think even if there's an idea that it's going to give a certain level of competence, I think everybody always finds out in the end that it doesn't work like that.
Well, hopefully they do.
I think, yeah, hopefully. I think usually.
It's just there's certain things which I won't say that you can sort of look at and go, maybe in some cases they don't, but we'll leave that part there.
Yes, we could be heading down a ranty road.
Yeah, no, it's okay. It's whatever road. Right, so let's your training then. That sounds boring, doesn't it? So when at school you were obviously what? Well behaved? No, I'm not saying that. Did you obviously had some sort of formal training?
Yeah, so I went to art college and studied three-dimensional design, craft. It was a very materials-based training course in Brighton, and materials-led. And it was at the time when I was there, they did this thing which was really great actually in the first year, where there were four workshops: wood, metal, ceramics, and plastics. And basically, they'd put you in a workshop for a week or two and say, here's the materials, here's the tools, see what you can do.
Right.
And I'm very grateful for that actually, because that inculcated this sense of trying things out and being inventive and resourceful, and I think that was a very good approach. I think that's one of the best things of that course actually. And then I didn't know what to do, so I went travelling for a year after I graduated, and I thought, yeah, anyway. And then when I came back from travelling, I trained as an art and design teacher, secondary level, and then I lived and worked abroad for a while, doing some teaching. And then I got very ill. I came back to the UK actually and was teaching in a school in Brighton, very nice school, teaching art to teenagers. And but I got very ill and had to leave my work. And actually I went to live in Devon in a retreat community for half the year. And this are the Jays.
Yeah.
Having a little chat. And there my relationship to the natural world took on a new richness, because it was a contemplative community, and it was through the winter months that I was there. And so I spent a lot of time being outdoors, and met some very interesting people there and started to get a sense of relating to nature in a slightly different way. And started making things out of found objects and found objects,
yeah, right.
Natural objects that I found. And then
If you don't mind me asking, what sort of community was it?
It was a Buddhist retreat community. So it's connected to a retreat centre, and so the teachers came on a regular basis, and we worked the land, and we did meditation together. It was very simple, a quiet life. A small community, only like a dozen people or something like that. And then I came back to Sussex to train in integrative art psychotherapy, because I like the idea of facilitating creative expression.
Yeah.
Because I'd had that experience I'd received some of that while I was in Devon, and I found it very exciting and interesting. And the course I did was very experiential in the first year, and it was really fantastic. And it loosened up my creative flow. My education up to that point had been quite rigid, I would say, quite structured, and I always felt like I'd never really found my creative voice. I didn't really know what I was doing. I felt I'd learned a lot of techniques and skills, but I didn't know what I had to say. I didn't see the point in making art because I didn't think I had anything to say.
Oh, okay.
And so doing the art therapy training opened that door. It was amazing. It was so.
Was there something
great.
in particular that you could sort of say that you go, yeah, there was this, and it really. It's difficult. It's just really.
What helped to open?
Yeah,
that up?
like a sort of like a pivotal moment, or.
There wasn't really a pivotal moment, but it was a sort of a drip feed thing, I think, and we just did lots. Because it was an integrative psychotherapy training, we came at the inner world from lots of different angles.
Right.
And so from dreams, from making sounds, from movement, from painting, from active imagination.
Right.
And there was just a general encouragement to express the inner world through creative means.
Right.
It's just incredible permission and support to do that.
So, this is interesting. Roughly what period of time is this?
In terms of my age, or in terms of the year?
Year.
Late 90s.
Okay. I'm just wondering how much of that, because obviously you're saying about active imagination, it sounds sort of quite Jungian type.
Yeah, that was the Jungian aspect.
Yeah.
I love the Jungian approach. It's amazing.
Yes,
it's so rich and soulful and deep.
Yes.
Fabulous.
It's like I say, we all want to be forever young. Isn't it?
Brilliant.
But it is fascinating because the active imagination stuff comes up quite a lot in these podcasts.
Is it?
Yes.
In creative people.
Yes. Yes. The reason I asked the year, well, the time, roughly the time, was I was just wondering how unusual that was for that time.
Well, I don't know.
It might not have been that unusual. I'm just wondering because
I think in the circles I moved in, it perhaps wasn't very unusual.
No, perhaps not. No.
But yeah, I wouldn't like to try to give an overview of judging that, to be honest.
No, I'm just sort of, intrigued.
Yeah.
But
yeah, I mean, I think that training had been going for some time. I don't know when it was started, but I think it was quite an established training. So yeah.
The reason I'm saying that is that if I sort of do a sideways step from the creating something, through the making, and look at music, that doesn't happen very often.
What doesn't happen very
well,
often?
coming at music from that creative imagination aspect.
Yeah.
Unless you go specifically, you know, I'm saying this, so there's obviously courses out there that do that and all the rest of it, but generally music education doesn't come in from that area.
No, it's interesting. And I remember when I was teaching art at secondary school, I was very frustrated by the constraints of the curriculum. And I remember thinking, I really love the young people actually, and I miss them a lot when I stopped that teaching. But you know, basically, it was a lot of crowd control, lots of clearing up, putting away, keeping everyone engaged. And I remember thinking, yeah, but I'm not really supporting their creative development. I'm teaching them skills, and although that's a useful thing, I felt like there was something else that I wanted to be involved in. And probably I needed it in myself, and I was recognising in myself I didn't have that. I don't know, with the way that our education system is in this country and the way traditionally we teach people, I don't know how you would integrate it, whether it has to be done separately, and whether ideally you do something that supports your inner expression, and then you, on the basis of that informs anything else you do creatively, and maybe it doesn't have to be specific to the creative form.
You might be right then, because I was having a conversation actually with Steve Taylor.
Herbalist.
Yeah. Yesterday. About something very similar to that, about the fact that you do need obviously to have the techniques and the knowledge and all the rest of it, and everything that you could deem as academic. And obviously his point was, you know, as a herbalist, you don't want to go poisoning everybody, all right? But the other part of it is that you've got to go off and do the sort of deep dive into the, you know, almost like the right side of the brain aspect of exploring deeper that aspect of whatever it is you're doing. So
or not necessarily the aspect of what you're doing, but the aspect of connecting in with inspiration.
Yes,
however you want to describe that.
That's more the point. I didn't say that very well. You said that much better. So there's obviously now a bit of a change in the direction that you're going from this point, isn't there?
From the point of my story that I'm telling.
So
yes. So I mean, it's interesting really. I look back over my career and my training, and everything I did, whenever I was doing it, I was like, this isn't quite the right thing. So when I was doing when I was teaching in the school, I was like, yes, but no. And then when I was doing the art therapy training, it was a similar feeling. Like it gave me so much, but I could sense that to work in that way, one-to-one with people, wasn't the way I was going to go. And it was quite frustrating because I didn't know what was my thing, but I knew it was I was going roughly in the right direction, and I just had to keep going roughly in the right direction. And after I did the art therapy training, I had quite a few years where I was not well, and I was trying a bit of this, trying a bit of that. Nothing quite made sense. But also I was very focused on trying to get well. And then a very important pivotal thing happened. When I was starting to get a bit better and looking for things to get involved in, voluntary things to get involved in, so I could have some flexibility. A friend said to me, if I was in your position, I'd really want to volunteer with this group of archaeologists in Lewis. So anyway, that's what I did. And that was the pivotal point, because this is a team of archaeologists who were teaching ancient craft and technology to children, to the general public, who were doing archaeological interpretation, building prehistoric-style dwellings in school grounds for educational purposes, all kinds of interesting things, and running summer schools, hands-on summer schools of experimental archaeology for archaeology students at Sussex University, and part funded by the council, part funded, I don't know where the funding came from, but anyway, they were very motivated in supporting people like myself, actually, who had something to give but didn't know where to put it. So anyway, I joined the team, and suddenly all these different strands came together. So the strand of education, the strand of making, so and perhaps more significant in terms of things coming together was this strand of ancestral knowledge and strand of raw materials. So we would go on missions to collect raw materials from the woods for a building project, and I learned how to thatch. I learned how to fire pots in a fire, like I teach now. I learned so many different things, how to split oak down to make roof shingles with Iron Age tools.
Wow.
Yeah, and so everything we did was more or less pre-Roman technology.
Yeah.
I mean, I can't even remember all the different things I learned now, but so many, and everything was really, really interesting. And so what came together was this connection to materials and this ancient knowledge, and learning about how to tan hides in the natural way, how to work with bone, with flint tools. You know, I started making things using only flint tools, and that was an absolute revelation. I thought flint was really boring, and flint napping it didn't mean anything to me. And then when I needed tools to make a project using bone, one of my colleagues there napped me the exact tools I needed for each job, for sawing, for drilling, for scraping, and that was a phenomenal moment. I learned how to make fire in the way that I made today for us, and all these things, and I was introduced to basket making at that time as well. And so then I went on and did formal basket training at adult education place in London, and also with individual basket makers. But I think it's another big bird coming in. And yeah, and that was an amazing springboard into what I do now.
That's amazing, because it's not where you expected it to come from, is it? If you think about it. And
I learned how to make boats. I learned how to make coracles.
Oh wow!
And also, yeah, I mean, I would never have. It was an incredible opportunity, and very sadly, that's no longer happening. But that there were lots of people there on sent there by the job centre to do training, who've gone into all kinds of interesting jobs in the heritage sector and beyond. It was an extraordinary project by some very focused and dedicated people who are delivering it. It was amazing.
See, I've always come up from the point of view that, and this is actually one of the reasons I'm doing these podcasts, really, is that you often learn something really important about what it is that you've got as a skill from somewhere completely different. You know, it's almost like the right angle to where you are. There is something that you could look at and you go, oh, that is the answer to the problem that I've had. But it's not in the discipline that you've got, because it's all to do with how we interact in our consciousness, and you know, how we interact with nature, and just the senses and things. Yeah, I know. But this is a problem being in a woodland, isn't it? You end up with something happening apart from the nice...
I think somebody's moving some logs around over there.
Yeah.
On a
But it's been
tractor
going on
thing.
for a while. So
It has, yeah. Hopefully it won't be too distracting to the audience.
Well, you know, that's just as it is.
It's life.
This is my angle of podcasting.
Yeah, yeah.
You get what you get.
Yeah, fair enough.
A bit like the old 1950s recordings.
Oh.
You get what you get, and that's it.
Yeah.
So your courses are when you... There is another element I want to bring into
Oh,
this.
yeah.
Yeah. You're interested in martial arts.
Oh, yeah. Qigong.
Yeah.
Well,
You not just Qigong,
No.
isn't it? Because you did Aikido as well.
I
didn't you?
did. Now, yes, and I'm glad you mentioned this actually, because
Oh, I'm glad.
this is a big part of what we're describing as finding things in a way you don't expect. Because so both in my creative practice, but also in my physical body, I knew that there was a lot of rigidity. And so doing the art therapy training addressed the creativity, but prior to that I had more pressing issues to do with my physical body, and really deeply held tension, actually, I would say, that was causing me structural issues. And so I thought, I'll do yoga, that's good. This is many years ago. I went to a yoga class and it was quite helpful, but I felt it was also quite rigid. And I just kept bumping up against my stiffness in my body, and I didn't feel that it was helping me to really move through that or find ways to work with that creatively. And I can't remember how it came about, but I went to try Aikido. Have you got martial arts background? Yeah. Okay. And so that was very interesting to me, because a lot of it is partner working.
Yeah.
And so what that showed me repeatedly was the rigidity in my system, which I knew was there.
Yeah.
But working in partnership, it helped me to find ways to loosen that. And it was very challenging, but very exciting to realise that there was a way. And so I practiced Aikido for quite a few years. I loved it. I love the martial aspect. I think that, there's a part of me that loves anything that's quite, physical. I like the sort of things which you would call Martian, I suppose. So martial arts. I used to have a motorbike. I like working with sharp tools, all these things. But anyway, so yeah, the Aikido was very important in helping me to have a sense of release and letting go and getting in a state of flow with another. Or the other was the reflection of the flow that I was able to reach in myself. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So that was a very helpful chipping away at things, and then subsequently in more recent years, the last 20 years, I've been practicing Qigong, and that was very much to help with getting well after being ill for a long period of time. But I think that the Aikido I did definitely informed my experience of the Qigong, which has been transformational, the Qigong, and I still practice it every day. And I think that the Qigong that I do is also very much about getting into that space of receptivity and openness and fluidity and dissolving of boundaries and rigidity, and being open to inspiration and other information. So I think that that's, a kind of ongoing background feeding of everything else that I do. Because Qigong comes from the Taoist, the Qigong I do actually has Taoist and Buddhist roots, but the Qigong is often comes from Taoist roots, which are very much connected to how we are a part of nature. We are the trees, we are the grass, we are the air. We are nothing else but the same. And so I feel a resonance with that and the work that I do now.
Mm. Yeah, and I could see that.
Can you? In what ways do you see that?
Oh well, that's partly why I said that. You know, why I asked you about it. Well, yeah, because I think the out of all the Eastern viewpoints, the sort of Taoist thing is very much rooted. You know, it is okay. You know, there's obviously a sort of a cosmic dimension of it, but it is really rooted to the fact that the energies that we're using is here, and it's us, and we're, you know, our physicality and all the rest of it. And in that way, it's sort of, how do I put this? It's not the sort of transcendental type, although potentially it is, but you understand what I'm saying. It doesn't come from a, let's be transcendental about this. It's almost the opposite.
Here we are in this body.
That's right.
I mean, it is about connecting to the cosmic.
Yes, it is,
forces.
but through, like a tree, that type of thing. You're rooted in order to be able to,
to rise.
To rise up.
Yeah.
Which then goes back to what you're doing with your crafts, because what I experienced, and obviously I know you outside of that anyway, don't I? But being on seeing you working, there's definitely that feel that it's not just, well, we're making this pot or we're making this basket. It's actually a whole experience of where are we? You know, we're in this place, and this place is part of the making of this basket as much as, you know, whatever it is I'm using, nettle or bramble or whatever. It's about, well, it's actually the fact that we're making it here as well. And that does come across, although you don't necessarily say that, but it certainly comes across.
Yeah, I mean, I do sometimes teach indoors, but I don't enjoy it in the way that I enjoy working outdoors, because actually I realise over time, the more that I've done this, I've been doing this for quite a long time now, for about 10 years, teaching these woodland courses, but really what I'm interested in is connection. And that's connection on many levels. So it's connection to the land, to the plants, to the creatures, to ourselves, to the making, to the cycle of creation. And I love to make, but actually underneath that, what matters more is connecting.
Yeah, which goes back to what I was saying about the thing that lies underneath, you know, the deeper structure of what's driving or nourishing is probably the best. Or both, really, I suppose. But it's that we often just see what's on the surface, but it's nice to sort of look at what's going on underneath there.
Yeah, and I think it doesn't always have to be explicit, you know. And I think that, you know, I'm all about experience, the experiential. And when people come on a course with me, yeah, they go home with a basket, and some people or a pot, and some people that's all they want. But imbued throughout everything is the agenda of connecting, and some people pick that up, some people don't. It doesn't really matter, but it matters to me. And I don't want to. I want it to be something that people could reflect on afterwards. Go, oh, actually, that was a really connected experience in this way or that way.
Yeah.
I don't need to tell people that's what is going on, because it's more. It needs to be more of a subjective experience, I think. And anyway, it's what has meaning to me, and so that's what I offer out, and that's all I can do.
Yeah, totally. Just, I'm interested about how you managed to get these things started, because it's quite an interesting project what you do with working outside. You said you've been doing it about 10 years.
Yeah, I mean, I learned a lot when I have got a long experience of running learning events from being a teacher, and in schools, so you know how to organise a learning space and how to, obviously I'm trained in how to facilitate learning experiences for people. There's a lot of practical grunt work involved in making these happen, which is hard graft and not visible to the participant. I'm very fortunate to have a good relationship with the people who own the farm here, so that I can come and use the space, which I'm deeply grateful for, actually. And yeah, I mean, I think when I was working with the archaeology team, I learned a lot about the practicalities of making events happen outdoors, and yeah, I just learned by trial and error. By doing it, you know, by setting it up. I mean, I started Native Hands in a very, very small way. I think the first year I ran with I co-ran 2 courses that we called Native Hands, and then the next year we ran 3 or something. So it built for the first 3 or 4 years incredibly slowly, because there's a lot of learning, and there's so much involved with marketing as well.
Yes,
that's such a massive part. Well, yes, as you know, and I think that 80% of the work I do to make the courses happen. Yeah. The courses are 20% of the work, and there's 80% goes on behind the scenes to make that 20% happen. And that 20% is the income generating part. The 80% is not income generating. Yeah. And
we're back to our 80-20 rule, isn't it?
That's how it is, isn't it?
It's absolutely how it is. Which again is very similar to what you were saying about when you make things, like, there's a lot of stuff going on before you actually get the item that's finished.
And like the engineer who hits the boiler with a hammer, that's his 20%.
Exactly. It's totally is,
and his 80% is all the years of knowledge.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I think that's a really nice place to sort of wrap up. Yeah. So I'll put details of stuff on the show notes for people. And I can really highly recommend what you do, because it is wonderful.
Thank you. It is good fun. Yeah. It's I really love offering it as an experience to people. And so Native Hands is the platform that I teach from.
Yeah, well, I'll as I say, I've got quite a few people interested in the sort of crazy thing that I'm doing at the moment with this podcast. So it's quite nice. And,
good. Well, thanks, Vic. Nice. Thanks for inviting me to have a chat.
Thank you to invite me to the fire.
Yes.
It behaved itself.
Bit smoky, but otherwise good.
Yeah, but it's
part of the atmosphere.
That's probably the reason we never used the video aspect, because it would have been just smoke.
And us dodging the smoke.
Anyway, that's lovely. Thanks ever so much, Ruby.
Brilliant. Cool.
Big thanks to Ruby. It's always lovely doing recordings in woodland settings. I've done a few now, about 3 or 4. It was obviously quite cold. I've noticed that by the end of the recording with my voice, I think. But check out Ruby's work, because it is amazing, actually. So anyway, until next time, I'll see you then. Bye.